I think the conversation around urban education has to change, and it has to change in this way. It has to be less about, a set of crisis narratives and more about the things that people are doing. Let's call them best practices or master practices, whatever you want to call them. The things that people are doing, the agency that people bring into their situations to make those situations better. We need to begin to study that, tell those stories, interrupt the deficit narratives. Urban education is almost always cast as this crisis narrative. And what that does, it does at least three things. One thing that it does, it suggests that, the schools that these people go to, and I say these people because it's very much an othering of people who go to urban schools. The schools that they go to should be pitied or destroyed. And that has become national policy. Let's close those failing schools. And when we close those failing schools, we leave those communities without schools, and we leave the kids within those communities. We leave them as refugees who go into other places. And they get othered again within those other places. And the research suggests that they don't do better in these other places. In fact, they become the underclass within these other schools. They become the stigmatized groups within these other schools. So instead of, fixing schools and fixing our communities, we abandon them and the people who live in them. The other issue, with that crisis narrative is that, it promotes a sense of internalized, oppression. People begin to feel really badly about themselves and their situations. And the irony is they're feeling badly about themselves and their situations while they're constantly working in other ways to improve those situations like most people do. Yet that story never gets told. So that internalized oppression usually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the third thing is when we, settle on that crisis narrative, the crisis narrative itself reinforces itself. Because all we see and all we can do is pity. Urban schools, and this too becomes like a deficit perspective. The idea then, of interrupting the crisis narrative, what I would consider, more profit narratives or profit perspectives of urban schools become, even more important. Because in every community that we go into where we think that there are problems, there are people who are working on those problems. We need to know their stories. And not only within those communities are people working on those problems, they found solutions that we need to get behind, that we need to understand, that we need to resource. A lot of things can happen if we don't write off urban schools and urban communities. And if we look deeply within urban schools and urban communities for, the types of rich, valuable, practices that are taking place, from the sheer effect of people's agency.
Welcome home.